Why do smart people end up with average lives? It is a question that haunts me. You have the intelligence, you have the energy, you live in the greatest economic engine in history, and yet the gap between the life you want and the bank account you have keeps getting wider. Most of you blame the economy, you blame inflation, you blame your boss. Here is what nobody in finance wants to admit. The problem is your operating system. You are running a mental algorithm designed to keep you poor. You are literally programmed to stay stuck. I am Jensen Huang. I run one of the largest technology companies in the world. My job is to see the future before it happens and solve impossible problems. In this video, we are going to debug your life. I will show you the 4 harmless habits that are quietly deleting your wealth every single day. We are going to fix your code. If you want the raw truth without the sugarcoating, subscribe now. We have work to do. Let's look at the architecture of your life. I'm an engineer. When I look at a system that is failing, I do not look at the aesthetics. I look at the inputs and the outputs. I look for the bottleneck. If you are in the middle class, you are likely working very hard. You are exhausted. You are stressed. You are giving everything you have. But your financial output, your net worth, is barely moving. Why? It is not because you are lazy. It is not because you are stupid. It is because you have built your entire life on a broken equation. The middle class operates on a linear equation. Income equals time multiplied by effort. You sell your time. You get paid for an hour. You work a month. You get paid for a month. In engineering, we call this serial processing. You are doing one task, finishing it, getting paid, and then moving to the next. It is how the old CPUs worked in the 1990s. One instruction at a time. The problem with serial processing is that it does not scale. It hits a physical limit. There are only 24 hours in a day. You need to sleep for 8 of them or you will die. You need to eat. You need to commute. At absolute maximum, you can sell maybe 12 or 14 hours of your life a day. That is your ceiling. No matter how hard you work, you cannot create a 25th hour. So when you want more money, what do? You try to optimize the effort variable. You get a promotion. You work overtime. You try to squeeze a little more efficiency out of your limited hours. This is a fool's game. You are fighting against physics. You are trying to run a modern high-performance application on a 30-year-old processor. It will crash. The wealthy do not use linear equations. They use exponential ones. They do not do the work themselves. They build the machine that does the work. At NVIDIA, we revolutionize computing because we stopped trying to make the CPU faster at doing one thing. We invented the GPU, graphics processing units, that do thousands of things at once, parallel processing. You need to move your life from serial to parallel. If you are a doctor, a lawyer, or an accountant, you are high status, but you are still a serial processor. If your hands stop moving, the money stops flowing. You are a high-end machine, but you are still a machine that must be manually operated. This is the trap. The paycheck is the drug that keeps you in the linear model. It is a steady drip of morphine that numbs the pain of your wasted potential. It feels safe. It arrives every 2 weeks. It allows you to pay your mortgage and buy your groceries, but it sedates you. It stops you from asking the terrifying question, if I stopped working today, how long would I survive? For most of you, the answer is 3 months. That is not freedom. That is precariousness disguised as stability. You must understand that wealth is not a function of how hard you row the boat. It is a function of whether you can build a sail. When I started my company, I did not just want to write code. I wanted to build a platform that other people could build on. I wanted leverage. Leverage is the ability to disconnect your inputs from your outputs. There are only a few forms of leverage in this world. One is labor, people working for you. One is capital, money working for you. One is code and media, software or content that works for you while you sleep. The middle class ignores all of these. You are taught to be the labor. You are taught to save your capital in a bank account that loses value to inflation. and you consume media instead of creating it. You are the battery that powers someone else's machine. This sounds harsh. It is meant to be. I am not here to be your friend. I am here to tell you why the math isn't working. You look at billionaires and think we are lucky. We are not lucky. We are just playing a different game. We are playing a game where the inputs are disconnected from the outputs. I can spend 1 hour making a decision that affects 10,000 employees and generates billions in revenue. That is infinite leverage. You spend 1 hour in a meeting and generate $50. You have to stop thinking about getting a raise. A raise is just a slightly better price for your time. It is like selling a depleting asset for a small premium. Your time is a depleting asset. You have less of it every single day. Selling it is the worst trade you can possibly make. You need to start owning equity, owning intellectual property, owning a side business, owning something that exists outside of your physical body. This is scary. I know it is. When you sell time, the reward is immediate. You work, you get paid. When you build leverage, the reward is delayed. You work for a year, and maybe you get nothing. Then suddenly, you get everything. Most people cannot handle that gap. They cannot handle the silence before the applause. They run back to the paycheck. But you have to stay in that gap. You have to build the machine. Even if it is small, even if it is just a side project at night, you must create something that processes value without your direct, real-time involvement. Until you break the link between your time and your money, you will never be free. You will just be a well-paid prisoner. And that brings us to the next problem. Even if you understand the math, you probably won't do anything about it. Why? Because you are terrified of losing what little you have. You have been trained to fear the wrong things. You are afraid of risk, but you should be afraid of something much worse. Now we have to talk about the psychological wall that stops you from acting on the math. You understand the linear trap. You know that trading time for money is a dead end. So why don't you quit? Why don't you start the business? Why don't you invest aggressively? Because you are addicted to good enough. The middle class is the most dangerous place to be because it is comfortable. If you were starving, you would fight. If you were homeless, you would be forced to innovate. But you are not starving. You have a warm bed. You have Netflix. You have a car that works. You are in a state of comfortable decay. In engineering, we look for local maximums. A local maximum is a peak that looks like the top of the mountain, but it isn't. You climb a little hill, you look down, and you feel high up. You stop climbing because you don't want to go back down into the valley to reach the real mountain, the global maximum. Most of you are stuck at a local maximum. You have a, quote, good job. You have a, quote, unquote, good salary. And that, quote, good is the enemy of your life. I recently gave a speech at Stanford. I told the students, I wish upon you ample doses of pain and suffering. The crowd laughed. They thought I was joking. I was not joking. I meant it literally. Greatness comes from character. And character is not formed by smart people who have successful lives. Character is formed by people who suffered, who failed, who had their backs against the wall and had to figure a way out. The habit that keeps the middle class stuck is risk aversion. You have spent your entire life trying to avoid pain. You go to school to get the degree so you don't have to worry about unemployment. You take the job with the benefits so you don't have to worry about health insurance. You save cash so you don't have to worry about the market crashing. You are building a fortress to keep the world out. But inside that fortress, you are atrophying. You are becoming fragile. When you avoid risk, you avoid the feedback loops that teach you how to survive. If you never launch a product, you never learn what the market wants. If you never lose money, you never learn how to manage risk. You think you are playing it safe, but here is the brutal truth. In a world that is changing as fast as ours, safe is the riskiest bet you can make. Look at what is happening with artificial intelligence. Look at the speed of automation. The skills you have today will be obsolete in 5 years. If you are sitting in a safe middle management job, doing the same routine tasks every day, you are not safe. You are a sitting duck. You are waiting to be replaced by a script or an algorithm that costs a fraction of your salary. The only real security is the ability to adapt. And you cannot learn to adapt if you are comfortable. I lived through the near bankruptcy of NVIDIA multiple times. Our stock dropped 80%. The world thought we were dead. I had to go home and tell my family I might lose everything. That fear, that pain, that is the fuel. It clarified my thinking. It stripped away the ego. It forced us to focus only on what mattered. The middle class spends all its energy trying to numb that fear. You buy insurance for everything. You numb your anxiety with entertainment. You sedate your ambition with balance. I am not telling you to gamble your life savings on a crypto coin. That is stupidity, not risk. I am telling you to take asymmetric bets. An asymmetric bet is one where the downside is capped, but the upside is unlimited. Starting a side business costs you time and a little bit of money. The downside? You lose some weekends and a few $1,000s. That is the capped risk. The upside? You could replace your income, gain financial freedom, and own your life. That is unlimited. But you won't take the bet. You are more afraid of looking stupid if you fail than you are of being mediocre for the rest of your life. You are worried about your reputation. You are worried about what your friends will say if your little project doesn't work out. Let me tell you something about your friends. They are just as scared as you are. They want you to stay in the line. When you step out of line, it reminds them of their own cowardice. You have to develop a tolerance for failure. You have to be willing to be wrong. At NVIDIA, we have a culture where we admit mistakes instantly. If something is broken, we say it. We don't hide it. We don't try to look perfect. We look at the data, we accept the failure, and we pivot. You are trying to live a life without errors. You are trying to get an A+ on a test that doesn't exist anymore. The school system trained you to avoid mistakes. In school, if you make a mistake, your grade goes down. In the real world, if you make a mistake, your experience goes up. If you are not failing, you are not trying hard enough. If you are not anxious sometimes, you are not learning fast enough. You need to reframe your relationship with stress. Stress is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that you are pushing against your limits. It is the feeling of growth plates expanding. Stop protecting your ego. Your ego is not an asset, it is a liability. It is heavy, it is expensive to maintain, and it prevents you from seeing reality. Drop the ego. Accept that you don't know everything. Accept that you might fail. And then do it anyway. Because the alternative is staying exactly where you are. The alternative is waking up in 10 years, looking in the mirror, and realizing you traded your potential for a false sense of security. And usually when people feel that emptiness, that lack of progress, that gnawing feeling that they are just a cog in a machine, they try to fill it. They don't fill it with action. They don't fill it with risk. They fill it with stuff. They try to buy the feeling of success because they are too afraid to earn the reality of it. And that leads us to the most destructive financial habit of all. If I looked at your household finances like a business balance sheet, would I invest in you? For 90% of the middle class, the answer is no. You are running a terrible business. You have decent revenue, your salary, but your operating expenses are out of control. Your profit margin is near zero. And worst of all, you are reinvesting your limited capital into depreciating assets. This is the third habit that keeps you stuck: status signaling. You are financing a life you do not own to impress people you do not like. We have to talk about the difference between looking rich and being rich. These are two completely different objectives. They are mutually exclusive. If you spend your money on looking rich, you have no money left to actually be rich. The middle class is obsessed with the aesthetic of wealth. You want the new car with the leather seats. You want the house with the guest room nobody uses. You want the brand name clothes. You call these assets. Let me give you a physics lesson. An asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. Your house is not an asset. It is a liability. It costs you mortgage interest, property tax, insurance, repairs, and heating. It eats cash. It only becomes an asset the day you sell it, and only if you sell it for more than all those costs combined. Until that day, it is a hole in the ground you throw money into. Your car is certainly not an asset. It is a rapid depreciation machine. You drive it off the lot, and you lose 20% of its value in seconds. That is a terrible trade. Why do you do it? Because you are trying to signal competence. In the animal kingdom, a peacock spreads its feathers to show it is healthy. In the middle class, You buy a luxury SUV to show you are successful. But real success, real power, doesn't need to signal. I wear a black leather jacket almost every day. It is simple. It is functional. I don't need to wear a three-piece suit to prove I am the CEO of NVIDIA. The stock price proves I am the CEO of NVIDIA. When you have the substance, you don't need the symbol. The problem with buying symbols is that it destroys your burn rate. In Silicon Valley, burn rate is how much money a company spends each month just to keep the lights on. If a startup has a high burn rate, it dies. It runs out of cash before it can figure out how to be profitable. The middle class is a catastrophic burn rate. Every time you get a raise, what happens? Do you keep your expenses the same and invest the difference? No. You move to a better apartment. You upgrade the car. You eat at nicer restaurants. We call this lifestyle creep. Mathematically, this means your break-even point keeps moving higher. When you were 22, you could survive on $30,000 a year. Now you are 40, making $100,000, and you feel just as broke. You are living paycheck to paycheck on six figures. You have trapped yourself. Because your expenses are so high, you cannot quit your job. You cannot take a risk. You cannot start a business. You need that high salary just to service the debt on the lifestyle you bought. You are not the owner of your things. Your things are the owner of you. You have to lower your operating costs. You need to be lean. When we built the first chips at NVIDIA, we didn't have fancy offices. We worked in a small condo. We ate at Denny's. We put every dollar into engineering, into the core product. You need to treat your financial freedom as the core product. Every dollar you spend on a status symbol is a dollar that could have been an employee, a dollar that could have been a share of stock, a dollar that could have been freedom. You are slaughtering your golden geese to make a fur coat. And it is not just the big things. It is the subscriptions, the gadgets, the upgrades, the relentless consumption of things that provide a dopamine hit for 5 minutes and then become clutter. Stop trying to impress the neighbors. The neighbors are broke too. They are looking at your car and wishing they had it while they drown in their own credit card debt. It is a circle of people signaling fake prosperity to each other while the bank gets rich off the interest. Real wealth is invisible. Real wealth is the money you didn't spend. It is the option to walk away from a job you hate. It is the ability to handle a medical emergency without panic. It is the power to control your time. You have to decide what you want. Do you want to look successful, or do you want to be free? Cut the burn rate. Strip the operation down to the essentials. If you can live on 50% of your income, you are invincible. If you lose your job, you have 2 years of runway. If you want to start a company, you have the capital. When you lower your needs, you increase your power. But there is one final trap. You can fix the linear math. You can embrace risk. You can lower your spending. But none of that matters if the engine itself, your brain, stops upgrading. Because the world is not standing still. And while you are busy cutting coupons, you might be missing the tsunami that is about to wipe your industry off the map. The final habit that keeps the middle class stuck is the most invisible one. It is the belief that education is a phase of life. You think education is something you do between the ages of 5 and 22. You go to school, you go to university, you get the piece of paper, and then you say, I am finished. Now I work. This is a fatal error. If you are operating on a degree you earned 10, 15, or 20 years ago, you are operating on obsolete data. In the tech industry, we have a concept called Moore's Law. Roughly speaking, computing power doubles every 2 years. That means the technology becomes twice as powerful and half as expensive. Now look at the law of your own skills. Are you twice as capable as you were 2 years ago? Are you twice as efficient? For most of the middle class, the answer is no. You are stagnant. You are running the same mental software you installed in 1999 or 2010. But the world is moving at the speed of Moore's Law. Artificial intelligence is moving faster than Moore's Law. This creates a gap. The world is accelerating, and you are stationary. That gap is where your wealth disappears. We call this the obsolescence cycle. The middle class treats a career like a ladder. You climb one rung at a time, but the ladder is resting on a floor that is sinking. You say, I'm an accountant, I'm a graphic designer, I'm a truck driver. You define yourself by a function. When technology solves that function, your identity collapses. At NVIDIA, we do not define ourselves by what we make today. We define ourselves by the problems we solve. We used to be a graphics company for video games. If we had stayed just a video game company, we would be a fraction of our size. We saw that the same math used for video games could be used for scientific computing, then for crypto mining, then for self-driving cars, and now for the engine of AI itself. We had to reinvent the company 3 or 4 times. Every time we reinvented, we had to relearn everything. It was painful. It was terrifying. We had to admit that what we knew yesterday was not enough for tomorrow. You have to do the same thing. You are the CEO of You Inc. If You Inc. has not launched a new product line, a new skill, in the last 5 years, you are a failing company. Most people stop learning because learning is hard. It requires humility. It requires you to be a beginner again. It is embarrassing for a 40-year-old manager to admit they don't understand how to use a new AI tool. So instead of learning it, they dismiss it. They say, that's just a fad. Or, I don't need to know that, I have people for that. That is the sound of obsolescence. That is the sound of someone digging their own grave. A fad is what lazy people call a disruption they don't want to understand. You have to become a learning machine. And I don't mean listening to podcasts while you do the laundry. That is entertainment, not education. I mean deep, difficult study. I mean sitting down and struggling to learn a new syntax, struggling to understand financial markets, struggling to understand how to sell. The wealthy are constantly updating their firmware. They read because they are terrified of missing a signal. They network because they need to know where the market is moving. The middle class seeks entertainment. The wealthy seek information. There is a concept called the half-life of a skill. In the technical field, the half-life of a learned skill is now about 5 years. That means in 5 years, half of what you know is useless. If you are not replacing that knowledge, you are becoming 50% less valuable every 5 years. Eventually, you become unhireable. You become the person who is experienced, but expensive and slow. And that is when the layoff happens. You cannot rely on your employer to train you. Your employer trains you to be good at your current job, not your next job. They train you to be a better cog in their machine. You must take responsibility for your own R&D, research and development. You should be spending 10% of your income and 20% of your time on your own education. If you are not investing in your own brain, you are shorting your own stock. You have the greatest library in the history of mankind in your pocket. You have access to the smartest minds on earth. You can learn coding, accounting, psychology, and engineering for free or for pennies. Ignorance is no longer an excuse. Ignorance is now a choice. If you choose to stop learning, you are choosing to stay stuck. You are choosing to let the world run over you. But if you choose to learn, you gain the ultimate power: adaptability. The species that survives is not the strongest, nor the most intelligent. It is the one most adaptable to change. Conclusion. So here is the architecture of the trap. The linear trap. You are selling time, which is scarce, instead of building systems, which are scalable. Risk aversion. You are addicted to a safety that doesn't exist, refusing to take the asymmetric bets that create wealth. Status signaling. You are burning your capital to impress people, increasing your fragility with every purchase. Obsolescence. You have stopped learning, letting your value decay while the world accelerates. These 4 habits are a feedback loop. One feeds the other. You work hard, linear, to buy things, status, which makes you scared to lose your job, risk aversion, so you keep your head down and don't innovate, obsolescence. It is a perfect prison, and you built it yourself. I did not make this video to motivate you. Motivation is cheap. Motivation goes away when you are tired. I made this video to show you the code. You cannot debug a program until you see the error. Now you see the error. The solution is not easy. It requires you to live differently than 99% of the people around you. It requires you to be misunderstood. It requires you to suffer through the learning curve. But the alternative is worse. The alternative is looking back in 20 years and realizing you were the limiting factor in your own life. The market does not care about your feelings. The economy does not care about your excuses. It creates outcomes based on inputs. Change the inputs. Stop selling time. Start buying assets. Stop fearing failure. Start fearing stagnation. The future is coming whether you are ready or not. I suggest you get ready. If this analysis was useful to you, and you want to continue debugging your financial life with this level of honesty, subscribe to the channel. We are just getting started.